Hey there, you're looking kind of cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out all my other socials. Enjoy. The hallways of Westbrook High echoed with the familiar sounds of slamming lockers and chattering students. Among the sea of teenagers, one figure stood out. Not for his height or build, but for the way others parted around him like water around a jagged rock. Vance Thompson strode through the corridor, his Letterman jacket a symbol of both athletic prowess and unchecked aggression. His eyes scanned the crowd, searching for his favorite target. There she was, Lucia Reyes, hunched over her books as if they could shield her from the world. Vance's lips curled into a sneer as he approached. "Hey, freak show," he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Still trying to hide that ugly mug of yours?" Lucia flinched, her long dark hair falling forward to obscure her face. She clutched her books tighter to her chest and quickened her pace, desperate to escape. But Vance wasn't finished. He reached out and snagged the strap of her backpack, yanking her backward. "Where do you think you're going? I'm not done talking to you." "Please," Lucia whispered, her voice barely audible. "Just leave me alone." "Leave you alone?" Vance laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "But then who would remind you what a pathetic loser you are?" He circled her like a shark, his eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. "Look at you, all dolled up like you think you're something special. Newsflash, princess, you're nothing. You'll always be nothing." Tears welled up in Lucia's eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Not again. "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue?" Vance taunted. He reached out and flicked her nose hard enough to sting. "Come on, say something, or are you too stupid to string a sentence together?" Lucia's shoulders slumped in defeat. She knew from experience that fighting back only made things worse. So she stood there, silent and still, praying for the bell to ring and end this torment. As if answering her plea, the shrill sound of the school bell cut through the air. Vance stepped back, a look of disappointment flashing across his face before it was replaced by his usual sneer. "Saved by the bell, freak," he spat. "But don't worry, I'll see you tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. You can't escape me." With a final shove that sent Lucia stumbling into the lockers, Vance sauntered off to his next class, leaving a wake of frightened whispers and sidelong glances in his path. Lucia steadied herself against the cold metal, her breath coming in shaky gasps. She closed her eyes, trying to center herself. Just one more year, she reminded herself. One more year and then she'd be free of this place. Free of him. Little did she know the person who tormented her was fighting a battle of his own. One that would change both their lives forever. As the weeks passed, Vance's cruelty towards Lucia seemed to intensify. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. Each insult he hurled felt hollow. Each push and shove left him feeling sick to his stomach. He couldn't understand why tormenting her no longer brought him the same twisted satisfaction. One day, as he watched Lucia from across the cafeteria, laughing with her small group of friends, Vance felt an unfamiliar pang in his chest. It wasn't hatred or disgust. It was envy. Envy of her easy smile, her graceful movements, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He didn't hate Lucia. He wanted to be her. The thought was so foreign, so terrifying, that Vance lashed out even harder in the following days. He couldn't bear to examine these feelings, so he buried them under a mountain of cruelty and aggression. But at night, alone in his room, the truth crept out from the shadows. He found himself staring at his reflection, imagining softer features, longer hair, curves where there were none. The image both thrilled and terrified him. As graduation approached, Vance's inner turmoil reached a boiling point. He stopped seeking Lucia out, avoided her in the hallways, and retreated into himself. His friends noticed the change, but chalked it up to senioritis. On the last day of school, Vance watched Lucia from afar as she hugged her friends goodbye. For the first time, he allowed himself to truly see her, not as a target, but as a person. And in that moment, he felt a deep, aching remorse for all the pain he'd caused. He wanted to approach her, to apologize, to explain. But the words stuck in his throat. How could he possibly make amends for years of torment? How could he explain feelings he barely understood himself? So instead, he turned and walked away, carrying the weight of his actions and his newfound self-awareness into an uncertain future. The years that followed were a journey of self-discovery and transformation for Vance. After graduation, he left his hometown, desperate to escape the suffocating expectations of his past. In a new city, surrounded by strangers, he finally allowed himself to explore the feelings he'd suppressed for so long. It started small, experimenting with clothing in the privacy of his apartment, growing out his hair, watching tutorials on makeup. Each step was terrifying but also thrilling. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was moving towards something true, something real. The decision to transition wasn't an easy one. Vance, who now went by Jenny, faced opposition from family, lost friends, and struggled with self-doubt. But with each passing day, each hormone treatment, each small change, she felt more like herself than she ever had before. 5 years after graduation, Jenny stood in front of her mirror, hardly recognizing the person staring back at her. Gone was the broad-shouldered bully with a permanent sneer. In his place stood a woman with soft features, long chestnut hair, and eyes that held a mix of confidence and vulnerability. She ran her hands down the fabric of her floral dress, marveling at how natural it felt. Her makeup was subtle but skillfully applied, enhancing rather than masking her features. She'd come so far from the angry, confused boy she'd once been. As she grabbed her purse and headed out the door of her small apartment, Jenny felt a flutter of nerves in her stomach. Today was a big day, her first day at a new job in a law firm. It was a fresh start, a chance to be herself without the baggage of her past. The law firm was housed in a towering glass building in the heart of downtown. Jenny took a deep breath as she pushed through the revolving doors, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor of the lobby. "Good morning," she said to the receptionist, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "I'm Jennifer Thompson. It's my first day." The receptionist smiled warmly. "Welcome, Jennifer. Let me just call someone to show you around." As Jenny waited, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had worked hard to get here, putting herself through paralegal courses while juggling part-time jobs. This was her chance to build a life she could be proud of. A tall woman in a sharp business suit approached, her hand outstretched. "Jennifer, I'm Maria, the office manager. Welcome aboard." Jenny shook her hand, smiling. "Thank you. I'm excited to be here." As Maria led her through the office, introducing her to colleagues and showing her around, Jenny felt a growing sense of belonging. These people didn't know her past, didn't see her as anyone but who she was now. It was liberating. Her desk was in a cluster of cubicles occupied by other paralegals and junior staff. As she settled in, arranging her few personal items and familiarizing herself with the computer system, Jenny felt truly content for the first time in years. The morning passed in a blur of orientations, paperwork, and meeting new people. By lunchtime, Jenny's head was spinning with information, but she felt exhilarated. This was the fresh start she'd been dreaming of. As she headed to the break room to eat the lunch she'd packed, Jenny overheard a familiar name that made her freeze in her tracks. "Lucia, the partners were really impressed with how you handled the Stevenson case," a voice was saying. "They're talking about fast-tracking you for junior partner." Jenny's heart began to race. It couldn't be. Not here, not now. But as she peered around the corner into the break room, her worst fears were confirmed. There, chatting with a colleague over a cup of coffee, was Lucia Reyes, the girl she'd tormented all those years ago. Lucia had changed, of course. Gone was the hunched, nervous teenager. In her place stood a confident young woman in a tailored suit, her dark hair swept up in an elegant bun. She exuded an air of competence and authority that Jenny found both intimidating and admirable. For a moment, Jenny considered fleeing. She could turn around, go back to her desk, avoid the break room forever if she had to, but something kept her rooted to the spot. Maybe it was the need for closure, or perhaps the desire to finally make amends. Taking a deep breath, Jenny stepped into the break room. Lucia's back was to her, but her colleague noticed Jenny's entrance and smiled politely. "Oh, hello," the woman said. "You must be the new paralegal. Jennifer, right?" At the sound of her name, Lucia turned. For a split second, there was no recognition in her eyes. Then, slowly, confusion and disbelief washed over her face. "Vance?" Lucia whispered, her voice a mix of shock and something Jenny couldn't quite identify. Fear? Anger? Jenny felt her cheeks flush. It's Jenny now, actually," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucia's colleague looked between them, sensing the tension. "I'll let you two catch up," she said, making a hasty exit. For a long moment, neither Jenny nor Lucia spoke. The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of unspoken words and buried emotions. Finally, Lucia broke the silence. I don't understand," she said, her brow furrowed. "Is this some kind of joke?" Jenny flinched at the accusation, but she couldn't blame Lucia for her suspicion. "No," she said softly. "No joke. This is who I am now, who I've always been, really, even if I didn't know it then." Lucia's eyes scanned Jenny from head to toe, taking in the changes. "How? When?" She seemed unable to form a complete question. Jenny took a deep breath. "It's a long story," she said, "but the short version is that I started transitioning after high school. It's been about 5 years now." Lucia leaned back against the counter, her coffee forgotten. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. I wouldn't have guessed." "I know," Jenny said. "I didn't exactly give anyone reason to see past the facade I put up back then." At the mention of their shared past, Lucia's expression hardened slightly. "No, you didn't," she agreed, her tone cooling. Jenny felt a wave of shame wash over her. "Lucia, I owe you an apology. Many apologies, actually. What I did to you in high school, it was cruel and inexcusable." Lucia's eyes narrowed. "You made my life hell," she said bluntly, "for years." Jenny nodded, fighting back tears. "I know, and I'm so sorry. I was dealing with a lot of confusion and self-hatred back then, but that's no excuse for how I treated you." Lucia was quiet for a long moment, studying Jenny's face. "You really have changed, haven't you?" she finally said, her voice softer. "In every way that matters," Jenny confirmed. "Lucia, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I want you to know that not a day goes by that I don't regret how I treated you. If I could go back and change things, I would." Lucia sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I appreciate that," she said. "And I can see that you've been through a lot. But you're right, forgiveness isn't something I can just hand out, especially not after everything that happened." Jenny nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "I understand. I wanted you to know, and I promise I won't make things uncomfortable for you here. If you want, I can see about transferring to a different department, or even looking for another job." To Jenny's surprise, Lucia shook her head. "That won't be necessary," she said. "We're adults now. I think we can be professional, don't you?" "Of course," Jenny agreed quickly. "Absolutely." An awkward silence fell between them. Jenny fidgeted with the strap of her lunch bag, unsure of what to say next. Finally, Lucia spoke. "Look, this is a lot to process. I need some time to think about all this. But maybe we could get coffee sometime? Talk more about everything?" Jenny felt a flicker of hope in her chest. "I'd like that," she said softly. "Whenever you're ready." Lucia nodded, then glanced at her watch. "I should get back to work, but it was interesting seeing you, Jenny." With that, she left the break room, leaving Jenny alone with her tumultuous thoughts and emotions. The next few weeks were a strange dance of avoidance and cautious interaction between Jenny and Lucia. They were polite when their paths crossed at work, but there was always an undercurrent of tension, of unfinished business. Jenny threw herself into her work, determined to prove herself both as a competent paralegal and as a changed person. She stayed late, volunteered for extra projects, and did everything she could to be an asset to the firm. One evening, as Jenny was packing up to leave, she heard a knock on her cubicle wall. She looked up to see Lucia standing there, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Hey," Lucia said. "I was wondering if that offer for coffee was still open?" Jenny's heart skipped a beat. "Of course," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Now?" Lucia nodded. "If you're free, there's a little cafe around the corner that stays open late." "I'm free," Jenny said, perhaps a bit too quickly. She grabbed her purse and followed Lucia out of the office. The cafe was cozy and quiet, with soft jazz playing in the background. They settled into a corner booth, each cradling a steaming mug of coffee. For a while, neither spoke. Jenny traced the rim of her mug with her finger, trying to work up the courage to break the silence. Finally, Lucia sighed. "This is weird, isn't it?" Jenny couldn't help but laugh softly. "Yeah, it really is. I've been doing a lot of thinking," Lucia continued. "About high school, about you, about everything, and I have questions. A lot of questions." Jenny nodded. "I'll answer anything you want to know. You deserve that much." Lucia took a sip of her coffee, seemingly gathering her thoughts. "When did you know?" she finally asked. That you wanted to transition." Jenny considered the question carefully. "I think deep down I always knew something was different, but I didn't have the words for it or the courage to face it. It wasn't until after graduation, when I was away from everyone's expectations, that I really started to confront those feelings. And that's why you were so cruel? Because you were fighting against who you really were?" Jenny flinched at the word cruel, but she knew it was accurate. "Partly," she admitted. "I was so angry all the time, and I didn't understand why. I lashed out at everyone, but especially at you because I was jealous." Lucia's eyebrows shot up. "Jealous? Of me?" Jenny nodded, feeling her cheeks flush. "You were everything I wanted to be, but was too afraid to admit. You were beautiful, graceful, confident in your femininity. I hated you for it, but really, I hated myself for wanting it." Lucia was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. "That doesn't make it okay," she finally said. "What you did." "I know," Jenny said quickly. "It doesn't excuse anything. I'm not trying to justify my actions, just explain them, I guess." Lucia nodded slowly. "I appreciate your honesty," she said. "It helps a little to understand where it all came from. But Jenny, you have to understand, those years were hell for me. The constant fear, the humiliation, the feeling that I was worthless. It took me years of therapy to work through all that." Jenny felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Lucia. I know it doesn't change anything, but I am truly deeply sorry for all the pain I caused you." To Jenny's surprise, Lucia reached across the table and placed her hand over Jenny's. "I believe you," she said softly, "and I can see how much you've changed. It's actually kind of amazing, seeing you now. You seem so much more at peace." Jenny gave a watery smile. "I am," she said. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm truly myself. It hasn't been an easy journey, but it's been worth it." They talked for hours, long after their coffee had gone cold. Jenny shared the struggles of her transition, the fears, the losses, the moments of doubt. Lucia opened up about her own journey, how she'd used the pain of her high school years as fuel to drive her success, how she'd learned to stand up for herself and others. As the cafe was closing up around them, Lucia looked at Jenny with a mix of emotions in her eyes. "I'm glad we did this," she said. "I won't lie. Part of me wanted to hate you when I first realized who you were. But I can't. You're not that person anymore." Jenny felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means more to me than you know." As they stood to leave, Lucia hesitated for a moment. "Jenny, I think I'd like to try being friends, if you're open to that." Jenny felt a warmth spread through her chest. "I'd like that very much," she said. They walked out into the cool night air, both feeling as if something significant had shifted between them. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. There was still too much history, too much pain for that, but it was a beginning, a chance to rewrite their shared story. Over the next few months, Jenny and Lucia's tentative friendship began to blossom. They started having lunch together occasionally, sharing stories about their lives and discovering common interests they never knew they had. Jenny found herself looking forward to these moments, cherishing every smile and laugh she could coax from Lucia. She was careful not to push too hard or expect too much, always mindful of their complicated history. One day, as they were walking back to the office after lunch, Lucia turned to Jenny with a serious expression. "Can I ask you something personal?" Jenny nodded, her heart rate picking up slightly. "Of course." Lucia hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Are you happy? I mean, truly happy with who you are now?" The question caught Jenny off guard, but she didn't hesitate in her answer. "Yes," she said softly. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm living authentically. It hasn't always been easy, and there are still challenges, but yes, I'm happy." Lucia smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "I'm glad," she said. "You deserve to be happy, Jenny." The use of her chosen name, spoken with such sincerity, made Jenny's heart swell. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means a lot, especially coming from you." They walked in comfortable silence for a few moments before Lucia spoke again. "You know, it's strange. If someone had told me in high school that one day I'd be friends with Vance Thompson, I would have thought they were crazy. But now, I'm really glad you're in my life, Jenny." Jenny felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "I'm glad too," she said. "And I promise I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for the pain I caused you." Lucia shook her head. "You don't have to make up for anything. What's done is done. I'm more interested in who you are now and the person you're becoming." As they reached the office building, Jenny felt a sudden surge of courage. "Lucia," she said, her voice slightly shaky, Would you like to have dinner with me sometime? Not as colleagues or just friends, but as a date?" Lucia's eyes widened in surprise. For a moment, Jenny feared she'd overstepped, ruined the fragile friendship they'd built. But then, slowly, a smile spread across Lucia's face. "I'd like that," she said softly. "I'd like that very much." Thanks for watching. The rest won't be viewable on YouTube, so check out Patreon if you want more. I hope you have a wonderful day, my cutie.